Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square, and welcome to First Draft, where I speak with journalists and authors about their important work and the stories behind them. Last week, the people of Wisconsin went to the polls, and voter enthusiasm was through the roof. According to reports, nearly 800,000 Democrats cast ballots, which was one of the highest totals for a midterm primary election in 2 decades. Pat Kreitlow has served in the Wisconsin legislature, and he's also covered Wisconsin politics for decades. He is the founding editor of Up North News, which is a publication from COURIER newsroom. He has been covering all the ins and outs of this very exciting primary season, and we're so happy to welcome him here today. Pat, thank you for being here.
My pleasure, Susan. Good morning. Nice to be here.
Great. Well, I think the question on everybody's minds is, what the heck happened with polling in Wisconsin? I know that your publication co-sponsored a poll a few weeks before the election that showed Francesca Hong, the DSA candidate, was up by nearly 30 points. She ended up narrowly losing. So tell us what went on with polling. Where were the misses?
Well, not being, any kind of an expert on polling methodology, I'm going to lead on this question by saying it's less about the polling and it's more about the dynamics of this race at the last minute. Now, this particular poll is in the field with about 2 weeks to go, when the Marquette poll, which is kind of the mainline poll here in Wisconsin, showed Francesca Hong with a substantial lead as well. However, when all was said and done, something had to happen, and that something did happen. And what happened was this. Representative Hong was at roughly 42%-ish in the polls, and she 43, something like that. And she finished at 39, and David Crowley at 39.5. What that means is the things that she said in the past couple of weeks, the Thanksgiving tweets that came out, things that she said after a police shooting, a fatal police shooting in Madison, and then things like that. And of course, you had the results in Michigan the week before. You had Mandela Barnes, the former lieutenant governor, dropping out of the race. Basically, she had to lose a little bit of her support, and everybody else had to look at an alternative, which nobody thought was going to happen until Governor Tony Evers decided to encourage David Crowley, the Milwaukee County executive, to get back into the race and endorsed him. That essentially was the perfect storm for Francesca Hong to lose by a half a point, and frankly, to lose, 3, 4, maybe 5% of the support that she had, which in a primary like this, with multiple candidates, with multiple people saying they were undecided, I'm not here to defend the polling. I'm just here to point out that what little bit she lost in support is perfectly explainable when you look at all the conditions that happened during the final 10 days, 2 weeks of the campaign.
Yeah, so it does seem like there was some sort of a backlash against Francesca Hong. I know her comments against Thanksgiving were played on loop in right-wing media, for instance. That seemed to be a big storyline. But I'm wondering, with what we saw in Michigan as well with the U.S. Senate race, where Abdul El-Sayed ended up winning, but not by the double-digit lead that we thought he would against Haley Stevens. If there were some significant misses in the polling where perhaps rural voters are being undersampled in the Democratic primary.
The methodology that I saw in a poll that we co-sponsored, for example, with State Navigate, was less about those folks being undersampled than it was Francesca Hong's supporters and younger voters being oversampled. And although they tried to do weighting for that, it wasn't nearly enough. And the Wisconsin electorate, especially a primary electorate, is older, it's whiter, it's more rural. It's one of my old colleagues in the legislature used to refer to as little old ladies who got nothing better to do but go vote. And they do. And they said they either did not take polling calls, they did not respond online. And if they did respond, they often went with, I don't know, we got 7 candidates, then 6, then 5, then 4. But with all those choices, Francesca Hong supporters, they were all in right away. They were locked in. You couldn't have said the same about the other candidates, especially after Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez's implosion and Mandela Barnes having to bow out as well.
Interesting. So Francesca Hong made a huge impact in this race, and certainly she has still very ardent supporters. What is next for her?
Pretty much anything she wants at this point. I mean, she's achieved, rock star status here in the state for a certain group. And frankly, for the folks who were not supporting her, a whole lot of them have now come around at the end of the primary to praise her for getting so many people involved and engaged and caring. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a sizable block of Hong supporters who were not regular voters, who are maybe now not going to show up in November, who would have if she were the nominee. But you have a whole lot of other folks looking at her and going, what was it about her that worked? And of course, it was engagement. It was talking on their level, talking like a normal person, being everywhere. I can tell you, she did the road work. I mean, every candidate gets on the road. She was seriously on the road, going wherever it takes. And she has always been a team player from the very beginning of her time in the state assembly, back 4 years ago or so. She was busy 2 years ago helping other Democratic candidates all over the state. She is as much a team player. For the rap that Democratic socialists get about being standoffish and not being a team player, Fran is a true blue Democrat and is going to continue to be so. And that signal alone, appearing with David Crowley this past Sunday at a unity rally, probably did more good than almost anything else that could be done. If David Crowley wins narrowly, you should look at her appearance this past Sunday on behalf of David Crowley as, a big reason why that happens.
We have seen a lot of unity between more establishment and progressive Democrats, both in Wisconsin, also in Michigan with the U.S. Senate race, where Congresswoman Haley Stevens enthusiastically endorsed Abdul El-Sayed. She's been on a media tour for him. We've seen that a lot of people are really trying to walk the walk in this, idea of vote blue no matter who. Now, when you go online, maybe on Blue Sky or TikTok, some of their supporters may not be as convinced of this, but do you think that there will be party unity going into November? These two factions will come together and it will be this blue wave that people are anticipating?
Yes, because that rattling noise you're hearing, those are the chains still attached to the ghost of Ralph Nader in 2000. Those lessons are still being learned today, that to say, both parties are the same and I'm going to go independent. More people than ever understand the hell you are, because it's a binary choice. It's Tom Tiffany or David Crowley.
Yeah.
There's no other choice right now.
I know, but we don't have to go back as far as Ralph Nader in 2000.
I'm just showing my age.
We saw. Oh, believe me, I'm a veteran of those wars myself. But I mean, we saw that in 2016 and 2024. That really bit Democrats, and so. Is this just a lesson that we need to learn over and over again?
Well, I think it is always helpful. And I can say from my time in the legislature from 2006 to 2010, that, we were talking back then about unity after primaries, that, the Democratic Party, state or national, should not be putting their thumb on the scales. And when they do, there's going to be rightfully a lot of pushback to it. But whatever the result, you've got to come out of this and say, look, this is a binary choice. And yes, in the comment sections, I'm still noticing it. There's some people that say, don't tell me what to do. And I'm one of those who's been rather, unapologetic about saying, yeah, I am. I mean, because you can stamp your feet all you want, but it's still David Crowley or Tom Tiffany. And anything that isn't David Crowley, which includes staying at home or bad mouthing the party at this point, is helping Tom Tiffany. There will be so much time after November 3rd to take out your frustrations on the state Democratic Party or the DNC or whomever. But right now, for 76 days, if there isn't a laser focus, then you're part of the problem, not the solution.
I have seen some optimism with David Crowley at the top of the ticket that perhaps Democrats might be able to get a trifecta in Wisconsin, which you have to tell me how long it's been since that's happened. I just as somebody from your neighboring state of Michigan, it seems like it's been a rather long time. But what would that mean? And what are the odds of that as somebody who has been covering state politics for as long as you have?
It's definitely not a lock, and I'm happy about that, because then people don't get complacent between now and November 3rd. But I was part of it the last time there was a trifecta, and again, that was during my term from 2006 to 2010. 2010 was the year of the Tea Party, for folks who need a refresher, and that brought in Scott Walker as governor. It brought in Republican majorities in both the Assembly and Senate. It brought in, Act 10, which eliminated collective bargaining rights for public employees. It put our economy, on a bad track compared to our neighbors. And of course, the gerrymandered maps, which, again, it took years of state Supreme Court victories to finally make those maps a little bit fairer, and to put Democrats in this position where they could, in fact, have the trifecta of the Assembly, the Senate, and the governor's office. And if that were to happen, well, then you can have the prospect of putting things out there that actually have, broad public support, like addressing healthcare and education and property tax relief and all of those things, rather than, the culture wars and shiny objects that Tom Tiffany and Republicans are going to want to put out there.
Yeah. I know that Wisconsin is one of the most gerrymandered states in the country. Would that be a top priority for Democratic trifecta to draw new maps?
Yes, without a doubt, because people were shocked at how, the word I always like to use is diabolical, the Republican maps were when they released them in 2011. I mean, they broke the mold on all of the standards about respecting county boundaries and everything. They didn't care. They just wrote whatever it took to stay in power. And Democrats would be wise to say, if in fact they do have a trifecta, is to say either we're returning to the norms that there should be for drawing maps, and or making sure that we have nonpartisan redistricting. And a lot of Democratic candidates are campaigning on that, and rightfully so. We understand that it's not perfect, but if you're going to ask the voters, do you want to trust a nonpartisan commission, or do you want to trust a politician, even a Democrat, much less a Republican? I think they know that most voters are going to say, how about if we take that out of your hands, you politicians, plural, and let's not make this an issue anymore, because you guys got other things you should be working on.
Absolutely. Well, I know that David Crowley is facing Republican Tom Tiffany. He's a member of the Freedom Caucus. Do you expect that Donald Trump will be paying a visit to your state to pump him up? And what impact might that have?
I smile because Tom Tiffany was asked that by a Milwaukee reporter this last weekend. And I mean, he could not back in like Homer Simpson into the bushes. He could not move fast enough to not answer that question and to say something along the lines of, well, the president's going to do what he wants to do. So you did not see Tom Tiffany rolling out the red carpet. Now, if the president decides I want to be there because I can get Tiffany across the finish line, Tom Tiffany will be right there. He's not going to put any distance. He never has. He never will put any distance between himself and President Trump. But he will not encourage him unless he really thought it could make a difference in something like, parts of rural Wisconsin.
Tom Tiffany is an election denier, but that's pretty much the median position in the Republican Party now. But as we saw, especially in 2020, being the governor of a swing state holds enormous power when Donald Trump is in office, because Donald Trump will question any election result where he and his party don't come out ahead. So talk to us about what it would mean to have somebody who still can't admit that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election in the governor's mansion in a state as critical as Wisconsin.
Tom Tiffany has finally understood that he at least needs to say the words, and he did say the words last weekend as much as he can. Something like, we know Joe Biden won the election, but, and then he goes right on to talk about, the irregularities or things that, again, don't exist and are the boogeymen that he relies on. So even if he gives grudging a nod to Biden's victory, that can't change his pro-insurrection record. That on January 6, 2021, Tom Tiffany voted against certifying the confirmed results from 2 different states, and he said he would have voted against certifying Wisconsin's vote total in 2020 if that had come up for a vote. And he went on to support a Texas lawsuit that sought to overturn the results in Wisconsin. And he indicated a level of support for the insurrection fund that Trump and Todd Blanche and others appear to still be hell-bent on forming to actually give tax dollars to insurrectionists and rioters. Tom Tiffany can't run from all of that. Now, he's again, he'll have billionaire money behind him for all of these smokescreen issues. But Tom Tiffany is what he is. And so if David Crowley or anybody else wants to point out that this election denier would be the guy in the governor's office for the 2028 presidential election, that's not going to help Tom Tiffany much at all with moderate voters.
Let's talk about Michael Alfonso, who just won his primary for a congressional seat in Wisconsin. He is Sean Duffy's the transportation secretary, former congressman from your state. Michael Alfonso is his son-in-law, and he has been called a nepo baby. But this is a relatively safe seat, isn't it, for Republicans?
It is because, full disclosure, I'm the person who ran against Sean Duffy in 2012 when he was running for a second term. My claim to fame is that much like John Lovett's playing Michael Dukakis, I still get to say to myself occasionally, I can't believe I lost to this guy. But I did. And Sean Duffy served for a few terms and now is the transportation secretary. And then out of nowhere comes his son-in-law, who has virtually nothing for a work history, especially a work history in the 7th congressional district, which is pretty much the entire northern half of Wisconsin, and is going to be nothing but a rubber stamp for Trump, which again sits well with a lot of people. He beat a couple of very experienced Republicans in a 4-way primary to come out of there in a district that is still relatively safe. I'm not going to say 100% simply because his Democratic opponent, Fred Clark, is a former state representative who does show the ability to maybe bring adult supervision back to the 7th congressional district. He can maybe have that kind of an appeal in a wave year if that's what this turns out to be. But Michael Alfonso, in my view, simply continues a Republican philosophy of candidates that now goes back a couple of decades to the Supreme Court, when it used to be that these were wise people with lots of experience. And now the right wing's like, no, we want to get somebody young in there who's going to be a rubber stamp for forever. And that's what they've got on the U.S. Supreme Court. And that's what they're starting to do in Congress as well, is get some people in there who, fancy themselves as Charlie Kirk wannabes, and they will just be young rubber stamping right wingers the whole time if you let them. That's exactly the reason they've got Michael Alfonso in this district.
I believe that Michael Alfonso has been described as the love child between Jared Leto and Charlie Kirk. Okay. I can't take credit for that, but it is.
I'm stealing it anyway.
It is a beautiful description. I want to hear what it was like to run against Sean Duffy, because, of course, his claim to fame was appearing on The Real World, kind of the OG of reality shows. And of course, we have a reality show cabinet with Donald Trump, who is a veteran of The Apprentice and probably would not be president without that exposure to Americans and portraying him as this master negotiator, which the Iranians have found out not to be true. But Sean Duffy has always come across to me as a lightweight, and he has his tenure as transportation secretary has been marked with air travel delays and crashes, not really inspiring a lot of confidence. But what was he like as a member of Congress, and what was he like to run against?
Well, of course, in the beginning, we were still in essentially the Tea Party wave, and so he just simply had to say all the right things about fighting the debt and deficit, which only grew while he was in Congress, and be a loyal foot soldier to the movement of the party that eventually became known as MAGA. The transformation of Sean Duffy has been rather disturbing. When I was running against him in 2012, and I'm still the one who's come the closest to Sean Duffy, beating him. All the other candidates since haven't come as close. So he still does have some, of course, TV appeal there. But his transformation into somebody who went from kind of aw shucks, I'm right of center, but I really want to get along with everybody, to embracing, the rudeness that you saw in Sean Duffy when he was testifying before a congressional committee, a month or two ago, that he understands. He's always understood this is a show, and he knows how to put on a show. It's what got him a gig on basic cable. It's what got him a gig in the White House. And by putting on a show for Donald Trump, he was able to browbeat him into endorsing his son-in-law over a much more experienced, longtime congressional district Republican Party chair. And so I hate the fact that people look at politics as a game, but Sean Duffy has always known how to play that particular part of the game, which does not involve, a lot of policy, or frankly, a lot of accomplishments. It's about performing and winning, and he's trying to instill that in his family dynasty, wannabe, the same way that Trump is.
Right. And of course, his wife, Rachel Campos Duffy, is a Fox News fixture, which is an added bonus for Donald Trump because he gets his message amplified there as well. And I understand that they have an aborted reality TV show that was supposed to be being produced.
Still waiting on it. That the guy who was part of The Real World, and then I think Road Rules for a time, has this road trip that was funded in part with underwriting support from, coincidentally, a lot of transportation related companies that Sean Duffy is supposed to be regulating and overseeing. And of course, much like their political contributions, they don't get it directly, but through third parties and other arrangements, you still see the support is still there. And yet the show, which was supposed to be all about America's 250th birthday, did not air by then, and still has not aired for reasons unknown. If it were just the blowback about the corporate money, well, that'd be unique, because God knows that's never stopped anything else about the Trump administration so far. So whatever other hangups are keeping it from airing at the moment, the concern is that maybe it's now lying in wait, not for July 4th, but for something closer to Election Day, when, again, Michael Alfonso is appearing in some of these videos about his, great American road trip. And so maybe that corporate money actually is a de facto campaign contribution, in much the same way that plenty of lobbyists, executives, and transportation related companies have made campaign donations, coincidentally, to Michael Alfonso.
It's all in the family business.
All in the family.
Well, previously, probably the most prominent member of Congress from Wisconsin was former Speaker Paul Ryan, who had a reputation as being a policy wonk, a very serious person. He was obsessed with cutting social programs, but he really kind of represented maybe the last of this more intellectual conservative movement that seems to be absolutely nowhere in Trump's America. Do you ever hear anything from Paul Ryan these days?
No, he's found a good paycheck somewhere. What was it? The board of directors of Fox News or something else that he was doing. Like many, he has cashed in and has something, cushy in the private sector, and no longer feels the need to wade into the public discourse. He has in Brian Stiles, somebody who once worked for him, but has now been the congressman in that Southeast Wisconsin 1st Congressional District for 4 terms now. Democrats are hoping the 5th time is the charm in going after Brian Stiles, but what you have there is Paul Ryan no longer in the limelight, but it's essentially as if there was this, transfer of powers to say the right things in Brian's style, but to not actually get anything accomplished without the say-so of Donald Trump.
Talk to us about some of the other congressional races that we should have our eye on, because I know that you have some interesting races where Democrats may be able to flip some seats.
That is certainly a possibility. And the biggest one, of course, is the one that's here where I am in Western Wisconsin. And that would be the 3rd Congressional District, which is represented by Derek Van Orden. Normally in news stories, you'd write underneath, R dash, hometown. So Derek Van Orden, R dash Prairie du Chien. You'd be more correct to say R dash Twitter, because that's where he lives. He lives on the X platform, lives to insult and belittle and punch down and threaten people's jobs and get people fired who dared to criticize Charlie Kirk after his murder. Pugnacious doesn't begin to describe Derek Van Orden, and yet he was able to, win narrow victories in the 3rd district, which is a very evenly divided district, but it is also one of the most agricultural districts in the country. It is one of the most dairy farm heavy districts in the country. Derek Van Orden was given, a post on the House Agriculture Committee and has done nothing with it. I mean, we're still years overdue on a farm bill because rather than maybe working toward year-round visas for dairy farm migrant workers or standing up to, Trump's tariffs, he, much like Tom Tiffany, will put absolutely no daylight, because that's his only ticket to re-election is to hold tightly to Donald Trump's ankles and, go along for the ride and hope that there are just enough voters that you can either, scare or divide or sour them to the point where they stay home, that he would squeak out another victory. He is going up again against Democrat Rebecca Cook of Eau Claire. She ran against him 2 years ago. She lost by about 3 points, but she still got a better vote share than Vice President Kamala Harris. She still got a better vote share than Senator Tammy Baldwin, who was also on the ballot that same day. So, for Rebecca Cook, it has always been about almost getting across the finish line. And the more Derek Van Orden tweets and talks, the easier it might be for her to take control of this particularly purple district. And that's why, because there are so few competitive districts left in the country anyway, you are going to see just truckloads of money come in. And unlike, say, 2 and 4 years ago, you probably, won't see the DCCC or other Democratic groups pull out too early. They'll stay in as late as possible, hoping for a late surge, because it is such a narrowly divided district that, again, no guarantees. But if ever there were a year, even if it weren't a wave year, for people to get tired of Derek Van Orden shtick, it would be this one.
Wisconsin does not have a U.S. Senate election this year. It's your by-election, but you have 2 such different U.S. senators. You have Tammy Baldwin, who is pretty progressive, a Democrat, and she is your first openly gay senator. And then you have Ron Johnson, who I'm sure we could talk about for hours, because he's a figure very much like Van Orden, attached at the hip to Donald Trump, election denier, and has been a huge target for Democrats ever since he defeated Russ Feingold back in 2010. You will have an election in 2028. He'll be on the ballot. Talk to us about this dynamic. Is it possible for Democrats to finally get this guy?
Well, in this case, it will be a presidential election cycle. So it is possible that it could be, but we have also seen, Ron Johnson survive in a presidential cycle before. Ron Johnson really didn't win a 3rd term in 2022 so much as just a handful of billionaires dragged his carcass across the finish line with some wildly racist ads against Mandela Barnes back in 2022. So Ron Johnson, who has always always pulled underwater in Wisconsin. His approval rating has always been lower than his disapproval rating, but he always finds a way to win re-election in a state that, gave us Ron Johnson and Tammy Baldwin, because it also gave us Fighting Bob LaFollette, but it also gave us Joe McCarthy.
Right.
We don't do a lot of for a state that is as vanilla sometimes as we appear to look. We don't do it in the people we sometimes send to Washington, D.C. And so now that you've had the Democratic Senate primary out of the way, I'm not going to say that the jockeying has begun yet, but it won't take long until people start to say, okay, whether Ron Johnson runs for a fourth term or not, who's going to get into that 2028 primary? And again, with it being a presidential election cycle, there are a lot of people who are going to feel very confident that 2028 should be a good Democratic year. And I would expect that once again, we will have a crowded Democratic primary field of candidates.
You brought up those racist ads, and they really did go beyond Wisconsin because they were so beyond the pale. It does seem significant that your standard bearer for governor is David Crowley, who would be the first African-American governor, correct?
Yes, he would. And as would have been said about Mandela Barnes, but he dropped out of the race with just days left before the primary. And in David Crowley's case, he is still introducing himself to much of Wisconsin. I would say if you cut Wisconsin diagonally, the northwestern half of it just does not know him much at all. That would include Eau Claire and La Crosse and Wausau and Superior, whereas people in Milwaukee, of course, and Madison and even Green Bay are a bit more familiar with David Crowley. But he has been making a very good impression. And frankly, when I've seen the first round of billionaire ads against him, they haven't tried to paint David Crowley as some kind of criminal the way they tried with Mandela Barnes. They're going in some other direction that is going to come back to big bad Milwaukee, because that's what the rest of rural Wisconsin politicians do, is they run against big bad Milwaukee. They're already lying about David Crowley's record when it comes to taxes in Milwaukee County, when David Crowley actually led the charge not only to get more state shared revenue to Milwaukee County, but to every municipality in the state that Republicans had been underfunding for years. That was a bipartisan coalition that David Crowley put together to get that shared revenue bumped up by the state legislature. So they've had to resort to basically twisting his record on taxes, twisting his support on things like data centers. And at this point, they're just, while they haven't played the race card necessarily, they will find ways to play the Milwaukee card between now and then.
For the 2028 primary for Senate, do you expect that Francesca Hong will be one of those contenders?
I think it's entirely possible, since obviously she won't be a member of the state assembly. She's not running for re-election this year, so she's going to be a free agent for the next 2 years. She's also young enough to know that there may be other options that are out there. But at this point, I think that she, like others, will at least give a little bit of time for the ink to dry on 2026, see how the state budget goes by the legislature with whoever the new governor is in the early part of 2027. And I would say by the 4th of July next year, people will be asking her and others if/when they're going to make some kind of an announcement.
Well, by 4th of July, that's probably fairly late for a seat as competitive as this one. So who knows? You may see an announcement after the first of the year from someone.
Yeah, I would not be surprised at all.
Yeah. Before we let you go, you mentioned the billionaires that have played so heavily in Wisconsin. I know the folks behind the Uline fortune in particular wreak a lot of havoc in your state. And I'm wondering about this perverse legacy that you have there, because you're the land of LaFollette. Russ Feingold was a senator for years, obviously was the driving force behind McCain-Feingold, along with late Senator John McCain. And yet you do have so much money in politics. Where can we go from here, where Citizens United is the law of the land, and your state in particular is awash in billionaire cash, but at the same time, there does seem to be a huge backlash from voters and people who want something else.
They most assuredly do. They don't like this, they're already drowning in ads. And unfortunately, the billionaires and others know that that's just a sign to put more money in the pool, because the more that you can drown voters, the more they're going to throw their hands up and say, you know what, I'm not even going to bother voting, which makes their job a hell of a lot easier. And so right now, since you can't match them dollar for dollar, what you can do is you can run not just against the Republican candidate, but against their patrons. And if there's one thing Wisconsin has done right here, it's lead the way in targeting the billionaire patrons. Elon Musk came into this state and tried to buy a state Supreme Court seat. And he put millions upon millions of dollars in here, and people made him as much an issue as the conservative, it's a nonpartisan race, the conservative candidate that was running for state Supreme Court, to the point now where a couple of weeks back, the Wisconsin Elections Commission, still looking back on that race, said to the Brown County District Attorney up in Green Bay, there is a chance that Elon Musk broke election laws when he was awarding those $1 million checks and those other financial offers of people who just sign a pledge that they'll vote. And Elon Musk saying, see, it's just a pledge to vote. It's not bribes because they're not voting for a candidate. The Elections Commission, which is bipartisan, went 5-1 and said, let's look into this and see if maybe this doesn't run afoul of state statutes. So you could still yet see Elon Musk charged with a crime in Wisconsin for trying to bribe the voters. And that's going to send a message to Dick Eline and to Diane Hendricks from ABC Supply, to John Menard, to the Bradley Foundation, to all of those folks, that the gravy train may be coming to an end, not so much with Citizens United being undone, but by, you thought you were anonymously putting all this money in, hiding behind, generic names like Restoration of America PAC or whatever the case may be. But no, you're being outed more and more to voters. And as they get wise to it, hopefully we find more and more of them see through this and not reward the billionaires in Wisconsin who are trying to buy these elections.
Well, Pat, I can tell you that a lot of our readers and viewers would love nothing more than to see Elon Musk charged with crime. So if that does happen, we'll definitely want to have you back on to tell us all the details of that case. But tell us right now, what is the best way that people can find your work?
Sure. Our website, of course, is upnorthnewswi.com. We put the WI in there because Up North News is, admittedly a bit generic. So it's upnorthnewswi.com. And same on all the social media platforms, Up North News WI. If you search that way, you'll find the posts that we put up there, me and the other folks who are located around the state of Wisconsin, working on videos, working on news stories. I still do daily live interviews on my own Facebook and YouTube page to turn into stories for Up North News. And so we'd be very happy to have people come there and then subscribe to my weekly newsletter. I do a weekly Wisconsin politics newsletter every Thursday evening. It comes out, so people can sign up for that weekly politics newsletter, again, at upnorthnewswi.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here with us, Pat.
You're very welcome. Good to talk to you.